Just want to go through a couple announcements, just so you know what's going on. Next month, we do not have book for lunch on the first Wednesday because that's November 1st, and some of the staff will be at Kansas Library Association in Wichita. So we're going to do it on November 8th, and we're going to have a Kansas humanities speaker, Marla, and it's subject: a new generation of veterans, stories from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so you'll want to come. If you have a veteran that you know about, and he's going to speak also at Rotary for veterans. And so Marla here is one of the Rotary people. And if that veteran that you know has not come before, please let her know, because she would certainly invite them. Is that right? And that'll be on the 7th. Ours is on the 8th. So, and they sponsored both of them because it's different groups of people. December 6th, we will have probably music and some books. I'm working on what's happening, but I can't tell you until it all gets worked out. But we will have a program. And then in January, we're going to have Rick Austin do something. He's going to read a book. He always reads, but he's going to read probably a fiction book. And then next week, October 11th, we're having the election forum for USD 315, and people that are running for the school board are going to come here and answer questions. They'll know the questions ahead of time. It's not a pop quiz. They aren't going to be asked to, have you speak from the audience and ask them a question. We're trying to be fair. If somebody can't make it, we've asked them to put something together and write up why they want to be on the school board, so that everybody is properly represented. So if somebody doesn't have something here for you to read or hear, it's not my fault. It's not my fault, okay? So if you know them, you tell them to get their information to us, and we'll print it out, leave it, and or come to the program, and then Open Sports will be covering it. So we're kind of excited about this. Judy does story time. Now I'm going to have Judy introduce our speaker in just a minute, but I want you to know how wonderful Judy is. She does story time Tuesday mornings, Wednesday morning. She does a family night, which is basically like a story time expanded for children, for families. So if they have little ones, then they can bring in school kids, some of their school-age children too. And then also, she's the one that started LAPSIT, which is 0 to 5. And you can do songs, and you do reading, just read songs and clapping and all kinds of things to get that child and the caregiver or the parents or the grandparents to grow and learn and respond. It's a wonderful opportunity. Judy pioneered that here at the library. And she pioneered Story Walk for Northwest Kansas. She doesn't always get credit for it, but she did. They do it a little differently, but she's the one that put it on the tomato cages, because we like big books and we like them to be able to put all around town and make it where kids can actually read it from the strollers. So she pioneered that many years ago. And she also pioneered Play with Purpose, which will be after LAPSIT, and that's for 18 months and above. And they're learning almost, I won't say Montessori, but there's a lot of learning, and parents come and caregivers come, and they learn about how their child is growing, and if there's issues. They can learn to be referred to for a problem or a thing the parent's struggling with or the child struggling with. It's a really good interactive time when parents say, oh, I love that program. That is the best. I said, well, you need to tell them. And then we have the Youth Activity Center, and Judy works with Garrett, and together we have ages of children from 9 until 15, and they come down here and have activities, do some 3D printing inside, or play games, or computers, or Legos, all kinds of things. And that's after school. We also have ESL classes, and Vi is doing an ESL class Thursday nights from 6:30 to 8. We started the Spanish class for some of our staff and a couple other people to learn Spanish for work. And so she's teaching that on Monday at 10 to 15. She's looking for people we would like to start a Spanish class for like moms, people that are working between the time of 2:30 and 3:30. But we're working on that. So if you know anybody who's looking to do English, that maybe their kids are in school and they have time, we're certainly open to that. And as the weather gets worse, remember that we are on Facebook. This is our card catalog, and this is our card catalog, and this is our website. We have places to find out if we'll be open that day, and if we have a delay to open, or if it's snow or something like that, okay? Don't forget, we do have Sunflower e-Library, digital library. You can download on your, for your book, you have a library card, and you set it up, you can have this. And then also Hoopla, the same thing, different types of books. And you can use that on your phone also, use it on your TV, you can use it on your computer, things like that. And then 2022, we were awarded the Star Library. I don't know if we got anything for 2023, but it's quite an accomplishment to get it once because of all it takes, but we're pretty excited about that. So having said all of that, let me invite Judy to introduce our guest while I set everything up on the computer.
Okay, and I'm introducing Marla because I've gotten to know her over the years. And besides my love of books and kids, I really like history. And I had a couple people mention to me yesterday that realized that before I started here 20 years ago, before I started here 20 years ago, I did 12 years at the museum as the education director. So I've been very fortunate to do work in things that I love. And so with history, I'm a member of the Smoky Hill Trail Association. And in that time, I've gotten to know Marla because she's not only a member, but she's a board member now. And you may recognize her. She's been here before. She did the Women of Santa Fe Trail for us at a program. You may run into her at other places. If she hangs out down at Fort Wallace quite a bit, and you can find her at Fort Hays as well. Even though she lives in Hill City, she's been in these places a lot. Yeah. And you'll see her at Libby Hester. And then, like I said, Women of Santa Fe Trail. She's done I've seen the Foiled Dove presentation that she did for the women in the cattle town. And there are plenty of others. I think the last time she was here, we had bragged on the filming that was taking place out south of Monument and for the movie Contested Plains. And she actually played a part in that movie. Unfortunately, it is now at a complete standstill. So we did do a preview showing premieres in Wichita and Oakley and in Texas. But that's been, those folks who got to see that. That may be the only showings they have. But we're tickled that she continues to have that part and play in that role. So if that's not enough, and she'll tell you some other things she's done as well, but if that's not enough, she's also written. And they're children's books. And I will let her introduce those books to you and not get into that. So I turn it over to Marla now.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you. It's always fun to be with this lunch crowd here in Colby. And I've been here before. I've always been a character. Today I'm myself, or myself as an author. And that's a little light as well, a new phase in my life. And but I did begin my career as a teacher. I was an elementary, in fact, a kindergarten teacher. So I have taught young kids, and with that being said, you might brace yourself, you may have a test. It's either that or a little activity that we kind of thought maybe was too much after lunch. So in other words, then you may have a test. So it's often the dream of a lot of teachers, especially elementary, to write a book, a children's book. And you're exposed to a lot. I felt like I'd read 1,000 of them by the time I got through. That was a little bit of an exaggeration, but nonetheless, there was some you like more than others, and there was some that you would like more than others. And you hope that you learn something from the experience about that. And I tried earlier to sit down and write a book. And you know, they always say there's a time and place for everything. Well, at that particular time and place, the book just wasn't there. So I don't even know what happened to the manuscript. But then I got into this, and I felt I had to marry my history work
with my writing work, because it's too much to try to do two completely different things. So my stories all have a history theme to them. Now, if any of you have ever been a teacher, an elementary teacher particularly, you probably had to take a class in college called Children's Literature, which at Fort Hays State University, we fondly referred to as Kitty Lit. And I had a wonderful teacher by the name of Donna Harsh. She had taught down at Southwest Kids. And she was so noted for her work that they brought her to the university and she taught, and she was always so encouraging and so supportive. And her daughter even became one of my sorority sisters. And I so many times during this procedure wish she was still with us so that I could share and get her feedback and everything, but she isn't, but she was a great mentor and set a great example. And I've often said writing a book, any book, but particularly children's books, like giving birth. You get the seed in your mind, an idea, and it's planted there, and then it germinates, or it's a gestation period. You do the research, you read, you ask questions, you try to find somebody that knows about this, and you try to get all of your ducks in a row and get everything where you want it before you actually set out to write your book. Now, with children's book, there's yet another complication, and that's illustrations. Some people do their own. I wish I could, but I don't. And so that's a little tricky. And I'll talk a little bit more about illustrators in a minute, but it can also be an expense. And putting these books together, particularly since COVID, has gotten even more expensive. I didn't realize that the United States buys a lot of their paper from Canada, sometimes China, and of course prices have gone up. So printing or publishing has gone up. Now, I have used for both of these books, Mennonite Press. They did beautiful work. They've been in business for over 100 years. But prices have gone up. So I continue to look around for other ways of making this happen. And possibly down the road, indeed it will. But then you give birth to this book and you take it out, as I'm doing now, speaking with it, sending it places, and then you have to take the criticism that comes along with it. And so you're protective of it like you would be your child. But positive criticism is useful. And but just random sometimes isn't. So it's process. And of all the things I have done in the history community, this has been the biggest learning curve. And I've done characters, I've done talks, I've written 5 or 6 plays or melodramas or farces with a history theme and done it at these different ports and locations. And this was the next thing on the list was children's books. And like I said, it has provided me with the biggest learning curve. And so it's if you're going to do it right, it's a feat in and of itself. Now there's several ways you can go. I went what they call vanity press. That means you self-publish. And as I said, that's referred to as vanity press. And I did submit it to one major publisher. And the bad thing is I would hate to think how many submissions they get in a year. And so they have their I might add though they missed some things. For instance, you realize Toy Story was self-published. A major publisher wouldn't take it until it hit. And then they all came running to his store and he says, no, I don't think so. I think so 5 movies later and all that merchandise, he's done well. And he self-published Toy Story. So it can be a fluke, you know. But with major publishers, sometimes it's months before they even let you know. So if you're trying to move ahead with this, sometimes you just say, well, I'm either going to self-publish or print. And Mennonite is actually considered a print, not a publisher. You remain the publisher. When you give your book over to a major publisher, then they make decisions such as illustrations and the look of the book and the cover and the paper and then all those little details, and you lose all that. And it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing, you know, if, how much control you want to maintain over the book. So there are rewards and disappointments to either method, you know, of printing. Also with major publishers, they help you market the book. I've gotten so frustrated with this at times, I will call Fort Hayes and said, do you offer any workshops on marketing? And they said, well, we have in the summer, but we never have enough people sign up, so we often cancel it. But we do have marketing classes during the school year. And they put me in touch with an instructor. And the nice thing about, I haven't jumped on that because I wanted something that wasn't quite so time consuming, is if you're a graduate of Kansas College University and you're of a certain age, you can edit a class for nothing. So that's the nice thing about it, if you decide to go that route. And my first book was Custer's Mouse. I played Libby Custer. I thought that only appropriate. And it is based on a true story. Custer actually did have a little mouse named Mouse. Custer and his family, his brother, were known for their affinity for animals. In fact, he was so good with horses, you might refer to him as a horse whisperer. And they had animals wherever they went. When they were at Fort Hayes, they had buffaloes. His brother Tom kept rattlesnakes in wooden enamel boxes. And he loved nothing better than to invite you into his tent, have you sit on one of these enamel boxes and listen to those snakes go off. And Libby's dad, all you had to do was walk up next to his tent, slap that tent, those snakes go off. And she was always trying to discourage him. And one of the things, and I've been learning more and more about this. I watched that show on cable about the zoo. And snakes eat other snakes. And on one of their shows, they were mating, and as soon as they mated, they had to separate the snakes because one of them would eat the other one. And so Libby told me, well, she said, you know, they're going to eat each other in those boxes. You know, you need to let them go, you know, and she never could quite convince him that that was the right thing to do. And when they were at Fort Abraham Lincoln in Dakota Territory, that's where he rode out to Little Bighorn. He had partially grown buffalo in the backyard that had been a gift. And he had chained up in the basement a wildcat. And you can imagine when the cook and housekeeper went down there to get something and that cat ran to the end of that chain and snapped it. She certainly hoped to help. And so they, as I said, known for their snake, but this is a unique little critter, probably the smallest pet. And they were out on a campaign or expedition, and you see in the movies and TV the cavalry riding out. It's usually a relatively small column of men, you know, maybe 25. These were massive, absolutely massive. Most of the time when the cavalry rode out on a expeditionary or campaign, there was a huge column of men, wagons, because they're all supported. You have to carry all your food, you have to carry all the forage for the animals, your tents, everything. So these caravans were a mile or two long. Somebody talks about watching one of them ride out of Fort Hayes and come out, and they said they just performed a real cloud of dust. And you know, knew it was the cavalry moving out. So this was taking place. He had a striker by the name of Berkman. He came to him with this little mouse. And Custer said, well, what have you got there? And he said, well, I've got this little mouse. And he said, well, what do you expect me to do? And he said, well, you take in all these strays. And he said, Custer kind of rolled his eyes. He said, well, I can take him away and do him in. And he said, no, I'll take him. So they had a little cage bed for him. And while they were traveling during the course of the day, the mouse would ride in the cage in a supply wagon. At night, Bergerman would come in and set up his tent, put in his bed, his field desk, and while Hunter was sitting there writing long and lengthy letters to Libby or communiques of a military nature, the little mouse would sit on his shoulder or in his hair. He said he could feel his little claws in his hair. And then when it's time to go to bed, he had taken an empty inkwell and filled it full of photographs. And that's where the little mouse would spend the night. But they never caged him, and he went out and hunt. But the catch line in the book is, I always came back to the general. I always came back. So he takes his brother back to Fort Abraham Lincoln and Libby. Now, Libby wasn't really thrilled about having a mouse in the house, but if you've ever been around any of these forts, there's a lot of mice, bats, all sorts of things. So I'm sure she had more than one mouse in the house. And they had a gorgeous home in Fort Abraham, Lincoln. And they don't know exactly whatever happened to the mouse, but they often tell the story of the mouse. And this is kind of, I wanted a mouse with kind of, mice can have kind of sharp faces. And so we found a mouse, a breed of mouse that has big ears and a soft face. And so Alf is so even if you're not a Custer lover, this book makes him downright warm and fuzzy. So I always tell my friends that, even if you don't like Custer, and boy, he's really taken the heat since COVID. And but that's happened to him down through history all the time, that you're going to see a different side of him in this book. And my second book and latest book is A Dragon's Tale. Again, based in history. It's the finding of the plesiosaur at Fort Wallace in 1867. Dr. Theophilus Turner, the public surgeon, and probably alongside Scout Medicine Bill Comstock, they rode out, and about 20 miles east of the fort, they found in a shale bay the remnants of this plesiosaur. And they thought they had made a find, and in fact they had. It was probably the largest and most complete plesiosaur that had been found to that time. They contacted Dr. Cope in Philadelphia of their find, and he was delighted. He immediately wanted it. So they meticulously dug it out, and they packed it in crates with Celsius. Now the train did not go as far as Fort Wallace at the time, so they had to load them up, take them to Fort Hays, load them on the train there, and they moved out to Philadelphia. Now, I don't know if you're aware at the time, but they were experiencing not only the Indian Wars, but the bomb wars. Dr. Cole and another Dr. Otheo Marsh were fighting over who could find the biggest and best of dinosaur remnants and fossils. And so there was this competition. The funny thing I was telling the kids, this is what a plesiosaur looked like. And if you want to know how big it is, now if you've been to Fort Wallace, they have a full-size casting hanging across the ceiling in one of the back galleries. But it's as big as a bus. So you're talking about a large critter. It lived during the time of the dinosaurs, but it was technically a marine reptile. It swam. And the difference between is all dinosaurs to be included in that category gave birth by eggs. This critter had live births. And but it was of the same period, and as many of you already know, at this period of time, half of Kansas, the western half, was covered by an inland sea. And if you see some of the topography, like Little Jerusalem and River Breaks, the Republican Breaks, and all that, you can tell that this land was underwater at some point in time. And so this fellow went back to Philadelphia, and even scientists make mistakes. Dr. Cope put the head on the table. And when you consider that, I mean, kind of normal, the tail is shorter, usually the neck is shorter than the tail, but soon he learned of his mistake and had to readjust. And the neck is the thing. I read a little book to the kids called The Plesiosaur's Neck, because that is obvious. And it was his downfall too, because these predators took advantage of that long, spindly neck. And so it was a unique waterborne creature of the time. And I did take some literary license with this book. I did put in a little boy. I thought I made him the son of a cavalryman, captain of cavalry. I thought the book needed to be told by a little boy who was so excited because he had been given a book about King Arthur's court and he became enamored with dragons. And he thought they found a dragon. But as most of us know, dragons are mythical. Dragons were real, or dinosaurs were real. And so he just assured that they found her. And so he wants to be part of all of this. And so Dr. Kushner promises that he will be able to travel with them at some point in time. And because I wanted the book to appeal to a younger audience, also did this. And I've been able through these books work with some very wonderful, talented, interesting, helpful individuals. Now, my first illustrator, I said I'd bring this up again, was a man by the name of Ronald Kill, and he's a professional Western artist from San. And I'm struggling to find an illustrator, and I was down at Fort Warner for their Memorial Weekend, and there was a gentleman there. He was a PhD, taught a couple universities of Texas. He was coming up there regularly, and we were seeing talking. He wanted to know what I'd been up to, and I told him these books, but I struggled with this. Well, he had not long before gotten his dissertation, and so he was reworking it so it could be published and enjoyed by the regular public rather than academics. And he was putting in a few illustrations, and he used Ron. And he said, "Is your email address still the same?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I'll send you a list of somebody you might use." Ron's name was at the top of the list, and his phone number and address was there. So I waited a couple of weeks, and I called him, and I said, "This probably is kind of cold call." He says, "Not as cold as you think. I've already talked live." So I was kind of expecting your call. The great thing that looked in my hat was he was a real, and is a real Custer aficionado. So he was happy to take on this book. And he did just a beautiful, beautiful job. And illustrations are a big part and can make it or break it for your book on occasion. And the wonderful thing about it is that I had to learn is when you contract with them, you don't get the originals. They just send you, on a thumb drive or in some hard copy prints of it that you can use to publish the book. You have to pay more or make special contracts with them to get the originals. So I had no idea what he was going to do. Well, the year, probably been the Christmas of 2017, the mailman comes to my door with this portfolio. And I said, "I don't remember ordering." And he said, "Well, it's got your name on it." And I said, "Okay." So I took it, opened it up, and he had given me all the originals as Christmas gift. Oh, that's nice. And he said, "You can either sell them or keep them. You can do with them as whatever you want." And so I did bring, adults always more even than kids like to see this original artwork. And at first I was disappointed because he didn't sign it, but they're all signed on the back and dated. And just beautiful work. He works in watercolor. They need something that's going to set up and dry fast. And so they always usually work in watercolor, but all of these are originals for the book. This one, I already had written along the manuscript what I thought was the best idea for an illustration. And he told me he was very pleased. It was very cogent, very cogent. He said, "Most authors have no idea what their illustration should be. And you did a really good job." But there were a few places and one of them was the very beginning of the book. And I said, "You use your best judgment." And this is his. And he said, "I did this because I love the cavalry. I've always wanted to lead a cavalry charge." And so you got Custer leading the cavalry charge there with saber drawn and everything. And just he said his wife wanted to keep this one, and I thought maybe now let's see, where is it? The little mouse is taking a bath with a gun brush. to clean your guns with. And he said his wife just really loved that, wanted to. You can come up and look at it later. And then one of the cutest I thought was, the little mouse. He had a little Indian friend named Little Box, the little Indian mouse. And this is a bit, he's peeking out at the Indian, and I love this one. Looking at the Indian village. But these are all original illustrations, watercolor, that Ron did. Then the second book, I contacted him and he said, I know nothing about dragons or dinosaurs. And he said, I learned not stick to what you know and don't try to get out of your element. So I was a little bit lost there. So I again started asking around to some other authors, and I actually used a lady by the name of Julie Peterson Shea. She's the art teacher at Phillipsburg High School. And she did a beautiful job because she's really into the fantasy world of dragons and all of this sort of thing. And so she did beautiful work with the Red Dragon. And so they were great and helped me out. I actually started with somebody else, a good friend. And you know what they say, you shouldn't work with friends, and there's a little bit something to that. And we just struggled, and the more further we went, the worse it got. And the thing, again, biggest learning curve, what did I say? Even though he couldn't cut the mustard, I still had to pay him for the work he done. So again, you live and learn. You live and learn. So, and then I looked with Ken Trevethan out of Sternberg Museum in Hayes. He is a paleontologist and he is in the education department. And whenever I had a question about how this guy swam or whatever he did, what he ate, how many babies they had at a time, he was a guy I called. And he's also portrayed Dr. Turner out at Fort Wallace. He's portrayed the post-surgeon at Hayes, and he's even been down at Fort Larned. So he was excellent worker. Then, you guys don't know me that well, but if you know me, I always like something that nobody else has, something different, unique. And I decided I wanted somebody to read the book, put a QR code in the back, you put your phone up to it, and you hear them read it to you. And it's also good, you know, if your kids keep bugging you to read a book or something, you know, just give that, you know, and they can just continually read. But I wanted somebody whose name was recognizable. And I worked with this individual at sites, and we were getting kind of to know each other. And a friend of mine, in behalf of the 200th anniversary of the Santa Fe Trail, was sending him a box of tchotchkes dealing with the Santa Fe Trail. So we threw the manuscript in. I didn't have my name on it. And he received it, called her, thanked her, and the only thing he mentioned in the box was manuscript, how much he loved it. It was Michael Martin Murphy. And so we then ran into him down at Council Grove and an event. He played a concert. They have a new river walk, and they put in an amphitheater for performances outside along the river walk, and he did the initial concert. And the next morning, he and the president of the Murphy Institute were having breakfast, and we knew where. So we kind of ambushed them, and both of them took off their cowboy hats and went like that. So we went over and sat down with him, and I showed him the mouse book and everything, and then you couldn't delay it any longer, and I said, would you consider reading this? We put a QR code in the book, and he said, sure. Didn't even bat an eyebrow. So then came on, how are we gonna make all this work? And so finally he reported it. He'd had a concert at Logan in the Dane Hansen Museum on Saturday, and I'd gone up there, and I'd given him one of the t-shirts, dragon t-shirts. And then on Monday, I get a call from him, and he's down to Prairie Rose, north of Wichita. And he said, I've been working on this all day yesterday, and I just need the author here. And he's meticulous, even if he's helping you out, he's meticulous on everything. And he said, can you come down? And I said, well, yeah, I can, but it's 3.5 hour drive. He said, where are you anyway? And somebody said, you ought to ask him, where he is in Texas. So anyway, he said, just don't have an accident, just calm down, take a shower, do something, and then get the car up. So I went down there, we worked all day, and he was just, you know, he had voices and everything, he just did an excellent job. And at the end of the day, it was late by that time, and I was headed back, and he walked out the door with me, and he said, I won't slay a dragon for you, but I'll read another book. And so he said, we're friends now, and so that was just a great experience. And that's the thing about this history. I don't care if you're, you know, at sites like this, you know, I get to see all you people again. It's the people you meet, the things you do, and the places you get to go, and you get behind the scenes, and these people are willing to step out and help you out. So at this time, I'd like to read A Dragon's Tale to you, so you get a little bit of an idea of the book. My rallying cry rang out loud and clear, to arms, men, as I drew my mighty sword, just as my hero King Arthur, the great slayer of dragons, had done. With my father's help, I had carved sword lance out of woods. They looked just like King Arthur's sword Excalibur and his lance Ron. I, Elliot Kemp, felt sure the time would come when I too would do battle with the most fierce and cunning dragon. No small feat, as I lived out in the vast prairie of Kansas. You see, my father was a captain of cavalry in the frontier army. We called Fort Wallace home. It was the most western post in Kansas along the Smoky Hill Trail, and we were proud to refer to it as the fightingest fort in the West. To my thinking, it was a perfect place to slay a dragon and prove myself worthy of a seat at King Arthur's round table. You are probably wondering how a boy of 12 decided to rid the prairie of dragons, a foul beast to be sure. Well, it so happens I received it as a birthday gift, the book titled Tales of King Arthur's Court. That, along with what my mother referred to as my overactive imagination, convinced me that I was up to the challenge. You cannot ride alongside the cavalry and not answer the call to glory, to ride, as they say, to the sound of battle. I had chosen a fiendish adversary in the dragon. Descriptions of this legendary beast vary drastically according to folklore. Some dragons have been depicted as winged, horned, four-legged, and capable of breathing fire. Most were said to have above average intelligence. I am fascinated by these scaly, snake-like creatures with rows of pointed teeth. I have even heard that one could take the form of a sea monster. My good friend, Dr. Theophilus Turner, the post surgeon, once told me that long ago Kansas was completely covered by an inland sea. He showed me rock formations and fossils not far from the fort that tell the history of the plains. Dr. Turner also recalled for me his experiences as a young physician during the Civil War. I even found myself interested in the daily weather log he was required to keep. He was a good teacher and my friend, and he patiently listened to my make-believe adventures as a great dragon slayer. I was thrilled right down to the ground when, after showing off my acting abilities by staging a one-voice show of my favorite dragon tale for his amusement, Dr. Turner used his sword to dub me on the shoulders. By doing so, he knighted me Sir Elliot Wallace. I felt myself grinning from ear to ear. He then presented me with a chain link ring the blacksmith had made for the occasion. Dr. Turner told me the unbroken circle signifies the never-ending promise that he will forever be a knight of the Prairie Kingdom. I still have the ring and consider it among my most prized possessions. Dr. Turner was known to spend many enjoyable hours riding through the mountains and chocolate us with fellow restless spirit Medicine Bill Comstock. The pair would hunt buffalo and antelope on occasion mineral specimens. Bill Comstock had earned the esteem of officers and enlisted men alike. General George Armstrong Custer referred to him as a scout without equal, and wrote that no Indian knew the country more thoroughly than did Comstock. The general found Comstock to be very knowledgeable on all manner of subjects and to be a perfect gentleman. Bill, a grandnephew of James Fenimore Cooper, author of the Leatherstocking Tales, claimed no formal education, but he was wise beyond his years. He carried himself with ease and grace, and I did not realize at the time how much my young mind, not to mention my character, was influenced and shaped by my association with these men, who marked the trail for me and others to follow. So this is an actual photograph of Dr. Theophilus Turner. And this is the only known existing photograph of Medicine Bill Comstock. An elusive son of the West, Bill Comstock provided me with a rare opportunity when he, accompanied by his canine companion Cuss, one contagious critter if I ever saw one, took me up one of the branches of the Republican River where a village of Indians had once stood. Bill told me he had lived with the tribe for a time. As we surveyed the site, he pointed out the tops of trees where he helped place the bodies of the dead. As we rode back to the fort that day, I found he had given me insight into a sacred place that few would ever experience. I was privileged to know this man, and although I was but a boy, I hoped he might say the same to me. But still, I yearned to be a brave and courageous knight at King Arthur's Round Table. One night I lay in bed reading of Sir Gawain, whose name means White Falcon. As a boy, Sir Gawain learned of a dragon who had seized a princess from King Arthur's castle, put her on his spine back, and fled into the forest. So young Gawain sets out to rescue the lovely princess. Too inexperienced to ride with the nobles and knights who fearlessly pursued the endangered young maiden before she could be eaten, Gawain rode alone and unnoticed, mounted on his white mare Blanca. Several hours later, darkness surrounded Gawain on a moonless night. When he could no longer see a yard ahead, he lay down near a stream and fell asleep. Awakened the next morning by the sun, he found he had drifted off under an apple tree. The juicy apples not only provided him with breakfast, but filled his hat for the journey that lay ahead. Then, without warning, a voice thundered from the sky. "Do you have an extra one?" The voice belonged to the figure of an old man with a long white beard. Stunned, Gawain offered him an apple, which the stranger greedily devoured. He then opened his green eyes wide and introduced himself. "I am Merlin." Awestruck, Gawain replied, "The magician?" "Himself," Merlin said with a smile. Gawain eagerly asked him, "Then can you help me find the dragon and the princess he carried away from King Arthur's castle?" "What kind of help do you want?" Merlin asked. Gawain quickly replied, "To know where I might find that which I seek." "And you think you can rescue the princess alone?" The magician's eyes changed in an instant from green to black. "You know the dragon is a savage, merciless animal with only one weakness." Gawain pondered what the weakness could be. Impulsively asked, "What is it?" "The same as yours, the dragon's fool." Now feeling himself more than a little foolish, Gawain hung his head and galloped westward, humble but steadfast in his quest. Soon he approached a clearing where he saw the princess sitting on the ground singing. A red and brown dragon seemed to be enthralled by the sound of her angelic voice. Suddenly the dragon lifted his snout and said to the earth, "I He snarled. Gawain leapt from his horse with sword drawn, his voice strong enough for all to hear. "I am the Englishman you smell, Gawain, White Falcon. I come to rescue the princess." "Oh, do not worry," urged the princess. "The dragon will return with me to the castle when the last song has been sung. He, I think, is not without kindness." Angered, the dragon thumped his tail on the ground, making it shake. "Everyone knows how dragons are terrifying, but I have not yet eaten her because she enchants me with her singing." He shook his enormous head and scratched the scales with a razor-sharp claw. "I will slay you, cruel dragon," Dick Gawain proclaimed as he raised his sharp sword. The dragon stopped and breathed a mighty fire, reducing a nearby oak tree to a pile of ashes. "Your sword and lance don't stand a chance, young dragon slayer." Then Gawain remembered Merlin's words. He is a fool. Steadying himself, Gawain stood up as straight and tall as he possibly could and announced, "I'll wait for more knights to arrive. There may well be as many as 1,000. "They don't know where I am," growled the dragon. "Merlin told me and will tell them of your location." "It doesn't matter, I'll eat the two of you." In his effort to outwit the wily dragon, Gawain confided, "I have a better idea. We will pretend I killed you, and when they come to take the princess, they will think you dead. Then you can escape if you promise never to return. Suddenly they heard voices and cries from the forest. Unnerved, the dragon sputtered, yes, yes, I promise, what shall I do? He begged. I will attack you with my sword, but will not leave a scratch. Then at my signal you will fall down, appearing to all who witness as though you are dead. I will put my foot on your back, claiming victory. The princess will see this and tell the knight she witnessed your death. Gawain mounted Blanca, drew his sword, and charged the dragon, who opened his monstrous jaws and issued a stupendous roar. The dragon revealed himself as a true master of deception. With his last breath, he gave a desperate cry as though mortally wounded and collapsed, causing the earth to tremble. 4 knights, including Gawain's father and King Arthur, heard and felt the disturbance as they charged into what appeared to be a death scene. Gawain's father shouted, what happened? Is the dragon dead? Can you not see the princess has been rescued? Gawain answered, not wanting to mislead his father, but yet keeping the dragon's secret secure. When all were gone, the crafty dragon, who had previously shown no sign of life, miraculously rose up, grateful for a second chance, and fled from England, never to return. Gawain's skill and bravery served him well. Chosen by King Arthur as one of the first knights of the Round Table, Sir Gawain's daring as a dragon slayer was already legendary. Closing the book, I longed to take part in a bold and daring exploit, just as Sir Gawain had done. I wondered if I would find a dragon to slay or a princess to rescue. Struggling with this prickly dilemma, I broke under the covers with my wooden sword next to me and fell fast asleep, vowing to tackle the problem early the next morning. With the first rays of the sun cheering me on, I greeted the day. Not fussy about my appearance, I threw on whatever was within reach. As I darted past my mother on the way out the door, the man reached out and grabbed me by the sleeve and stopped me in my tracks. She then instructed me to put on my coat before I took another step. Buttoned up, I raced straight to the cavalry stables to find out the latest news. It was well worth the trip because it was there I learned that my good friend, Dr. Turner, likely with the help of Comstock, had made a most unusual discovery in a ravine near a bank, a half-day's ride from the fort. What could these two have found that would arouse such intense interest? No need to wonder, as I did a quick about-face and took off in the direction of Dr. Turner's office. When I arrived, I had to wait my turn as he was examining a soldier who appeared to be feeling rather poorly. Nervously shifting from foot to foot, I practically knocked the poor fellow over, trying to get Dr. Turner's attention. I blurted out my enthusiasm. What is it? Can I see it? With a bemused look on his face, Dr. Turner asked, what are you talking about? Realizing he was having a bit of fun with me, I said, you know the thing you found. Well, to tell the truth, I'm not sure what we found, he confessed. Puzzled, I inquired, if you don't know, then who does? Hold your horses, there are those who do, but we'll have to unearth more of the creature before we know, he explained. Creature, is it a drone? The words tumbled out of my mouth before I could stop it. Not exactly, but it might be a sea monster, he said matter-of-factly. We have discovered some huge fossilized bones sticking out from the side of the ravine. There was one more question I just had to ask. Did he breathe fire? The doctor chuckled. I don't know about that, but he's one big fella, he quickly added. Ellie, how about I take you with us sometime? We were carefully removing him from where he has spent more years than you can count. We are returning to the site soon, and I have received a letter from Professor Pope in Philadelphia requesting we send him our dragon. But I promise I'll make room for you on one of our trips. He was quick to point out it's already December, and we must keep up a steady pace as the weather and other circumstances may hamper our efforts. With the help of soldiers using picks and shovels, work continued through the cold, bleak winter of 1867-68. The team collected 35 feet of vertebrae along with fragments of skull and other bones. In 2 months, Dr. Turner and his men gathered almost 1,000 pounds of bone and matrix. It was the largest fossil dig of its time. Using crates and whatever packing materials were available to them, they wrapped the specimen for shipment. I really was not big enough to be of much use, but when allowed to go along, I ran about, helping with anything and everything I could. I had to be part of this great adventure. Later, I would be told it was the most complete plesiosaur or marine reptile found in North America up until that time. Described as Elazosaurus platypus, The dragon's official designation was nearly as long as he was. The odd creature had an extremely long neck and a shorter tail, which it used to propel itself in a kind of sea flight through the water. I decided to draw what I thought he might have looked like, but it was hard to figure out the head from the tail, among other things. Understandably, even the distinguished Dr. Cope confused the ends, finally placing the skull on the tail. But to my credit, my drawing had something the others did not. The dragon breathed a mighty blast of fire, hot as Hades. Dr. Turner reported that Professor Cope was anxious to receive the dragon, but the Kansas Pacific Railway had not been completed as far west as Fort Wallace for some time to come. So he arranged to transport the specimen by military wagon train. It traveled east across the desolate prairie to Hays, Kansas. There, the crates containing Dr. Turner's dragon were loaded on the eastbound train and shipped to Philadelphia. It was an honor for Dr. Turner and all concerned that the ancient creature be considered of such importance by men of science. Dr. Edward Cope, one of the leading paleontologists of the day, was so delighted with his latest acquisition that he worked tirelessly putting it back together, even if he did get the skull on the wrong end. I bet if the old dragon could have seen himself, he would have had a good laugh. Although he was now far from his time spent among the endless sea of prairie dogs, he was truly famous. He was something special. But to me, he would always be the dragon of my boyhood, who excited my flights of fancy. I never told anyone, not even Dr. Turner. But when no one was looking, I slipped my wooden sword into one of the crates containing his bones. I had no need to slay any other dragon. You know, I still can make me cry when I get to the end. And this is the casting hanging in the entryway of the Drexel in Philadelphia. So they have the same thing that Fort Wallace has. And so now I have submitted this second book, and here again, this is one of those live and learn situations for 4 awards, and those are tricky things. And the first one was the one I wanted the most, and that was the Wrangler Award down at the Cowboy and Western History Museum, Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, which is, many of you might know as the Cowboy Hall of Fame. And they have a big party every April and hand out all their awards. And I did not receive that one, but I had to think, like, well, first timer, and maybe it's a live and learn situation. The thing I hated the worst is they don't send you, and none of these people have, any kind of critique where you know what they liked, what they didn't like, how maybe you could improve. And I said something to a friend of mine, somebody on the board with me at Historic Fort Hays, and she said, well, they think you're a professional, they shouldn't have to. And I said, yeah, but even we need to learn, you know. So I always hate that. And then I also went to the Western Writers Association, and the same gal who won the one at Oklahoma City won that one too. And then each of the states have their own award, and Kansas is called Kansas Notables, and did not receive that one either. I got for one more, I don't know, we'll have a conference next week, we'll find out at Smoky Hill Trail Association. I'm on the board, so I don't know if that'll make any difference, but so anyway, it's slippery slope with this kind of thing, and you have to it's always a disappointment, but you have to take it, you know. You never know if you don't try, and you need to make the best of it. Now, I've read a number of other stories, and they may end up as expensive as these books are to produce, in a compilation of stories. I have one, and they're all history-based, even though the names sound a little funny. Rufus and the Marvelous Mystical Magical Chicken Foot. The Santa Fe Trail Minstrels, and the Great Chicken Trail, and One Mouse Fingers, and I'll probably do a sequel to the Custer book, and one on Meriwether Lewis, who kind of captured the first prairie dog and sent it back to President Jefferson. And interesting story. But the one I'm working on now that will be a complete book has to do with the orphan trains. And how many of you are familiar with any orphan train history? Very fascinating. It hasn't been as much talked about as a lot of our other history, but it's starting to come to light. And from about 56 to 1929, they shipped kids out of the Northeast, primarily the big cities like New York, Boston, Philadelphia, put them on these orphan trains, and they went off to all of the lower 48. Of course, we didn't have Alaska and Hawaii at the time. And some came to Kansas. You may have known some of these people. Most of them are gone now, even though they might have been shipped out as a baby. They are continually raising the estimate of how many kids travel this way. Now they're thinking upwards of 500,000 children were shipped out on the orphan trains. Now, the downside of this, and I've never gotten figures as to the percentage, but had very unpleasant experiences. And they were brought out here, the boys, to do farm labor. And they were kind of like servants. The girls took care of the younger children and the housework. And there were a few that speak of good experiences. The Orphan Train Museum in Concordia is a national museum for the orphan train. They have 7 statues scattered around Concordia. And the gal I'm going to focus on, and why I chose her, is I talked with her daughter and son. And her grandson is currently the minister at Methodist minister at Sharon Springs. And he's been an invaluable resource. And her name is Teresa Martin. Marilyn June Coffey, while teaching at Fort Hays, wrote this book. They were both at Hays at the same time, male or kid. They have a book available here for reading in the library. And it's you don't want to put it down. And there's parts that are just heartbreaking. And one of them that I felt, she never felt loved or wanted. And after these people that took her in Shinchin, after she found in there, the woman gave her key to the lockbox, and she found some of her personal papers, and then they had indenture papers. She never signed them. And she just had a really, the man abused her sexually, and she never felt loved or wanted. And the couple, this is how sad it can be. The couple had a little dog named Fanny. And so Teresa would talk to that little dog every day and tell her its problems. And the dog would just sit there and listen. And unfortunately, the dog got run over by a horse and died. And the man took it down to the riverbank, but did not bury it, just left it on the bank. She went down there every day and talked to that kid until it became sophisticated. She could learn her arms. So that's how sad, you know, it can be. And unfortunately, a lot of these people, you may have run across them in your lifetime, but most of them are gone now who wrote the Orphan Train. If you'll notice on the book, there's a little tag with 4 on it. Teresa was given that, and then the couple that she went to, they had a matching tag with 4 on. That's how you matched up. And they even had people that were similar to caseworkers that would come in and try to check on these kids, but if they weren't as thorough as they are today, and even people slip through the cracks today. And the problem is, they sit down at the table, and there were the couple and the little girls. I can tell somebody what they're doing to me, you know. And but she was a small little woman. She was about 4'9", 4'11" when she was grown, and she didn't get her high school diploma until she was 38. And then she went to Fort Hays, and she got a degree in, well, first she got it in German and English, and couldn't find a job, went back in library science. She worked at the Hays Public Library, and she started the first children's department in the Hays Public Library. She then left Hays and went out in Colorado and worked in medical libraries, working with doctors, and was very well thought of. In fact, the doctors pitched, once they started this society for these orphan train writers, and they were starting to meet and help each other through their troubles, the doctors went together and pitched in to buy her fare so she could go back and become part of and was very active in. But at the Orphan Train Museum in Concordia, there are 7 statues. And to get a statue, they had to be able to verify your history. And she's one of them, and so she is at the library in Concordia. And she's the little girl sitting on the bench reading the book. And I met her, I actually got to meet her, but when I was teaching with her daughter, the thing that struck me so much was she had on a Star of David. And she'd been raised Catholic in Shinshin. And she always teased people later, well, she had her bases covered. But through going back through her genealogy, she was pretty sure she was probably British. And from the streets of New York. And so I'm still in the research stage, and it's going to be difficult to kind of turn this into a children's book and not get into some of the more, but you know, kids don't know sometimes how well they have it these days, you know, knowing, but she struggled with what she'd been through, but through the work with the society and being able to visit with other orphans, they helped each other out, and she was able to kind of conquer some of her experiences and the things she'd been through as a child. And so it's a fascinating look at a piece of history that isn't always well documented. I think it's only in these latter years we're hearing more and more about the orphan trains and what some of these, I still would like to know how you balance out the ones that had a good experience with the ones that didn't, because it's appearing that there were more bad experiences than good. I don't have the documentation to prove that. And so I would, you know, would like to know a little bit more about it. But this is, you know, this is just a fascinating experience. But we're going to see, probably maybe should have thrown some kids in here, but like I said, you're going to have a little bit of a test. Okay. How did dinosaurs give birth? Eggs. That is a sure sign you're a dinosaur if you've given birth by eggs. Some of these were as big as basketballs or beach balls. But the bigger the egg, the harder the shell. And so they had a limit to the size or the baby wouldn't have been able to get out. So they were all, where in the world had dinosaurs been found? All over, in all 7 continents. They had found dinosaurs in all 7 continents. And how many species do you think of dinosaurs? You know, we think we're the king of copper rock. Of course, we weren't around when they were. But these guys kind of had it going. How many species do you think they've discovered over the years? 700 to 1,000. And most of them, we remember the big T-Rexes and the Stegosauruses and the Triceratops, those huge gargantuan, but most of them were our size or smaller. And what is still a living relative of the dinosaur that you probably see every day? Birds. They had hollow bones, as did those large dinosaurs, because if their bones had been solid, they'd been too heavy to walk. And so our living relative of the dinosaur is birds, chickens, turkeys, all sorts of birds. How long do you think maybe a dinosaur could live? Some of them, they think, live 75 to 300 years each. So, okay, we always remember the T-Rex. He's everybody's poster child for dinosaurs. How long do you think some of those teeth? 7 to 12 inches. And if they lost teeth, some of them could replace them. How large do you think their brains were? Pretty small. Pretty small. Stegosaurus, they said his was the size of a walnut, but they said the human baby has a larger brain than most dinosaurs have. So they were operating on brute strength and not much intelligence. But I guess when you're that big and you're the biggest one on the block, you have, now you've seen in some of the movies, these velociraptors. How big do you think they actually were? They're not much bigger than turkeys. And like I said, a lot of these dinosaurs were very small. And what do you think Tyrannosaurus Rex means? Word in English. Yeah, terrible lizard. And the guy who named him said that he didn't really feel they were terrible. It was just their, you know, their presence, their majesty and their size as he researched. Dinosaurs often swallowed rocks. Why? Why?
Digestion.
Yes, help with digestion. When you're, how much meat a year do you think a T-Rex ate? 22. And they were divided between vegetarians and meat eaters. The meat eaters usually were more active, or the vegetarians were more active, the meat eaters a little slower, but the meat eaters usually survived a little bit better. As I mentioned, I gave you a little clue on this. Dr. Koch and Dr. Marsh started what was called the what? Bone Wars. And trying to find the biggest and best of these critters. What lives today that is bigger than any dinosaur? And it's in the water. I'll give you a clue. The blue whale. It's 103 foot long. So bigger than any dinosaurs. What did those dinosaurs use those big tails for? It helped study themselves. They were so big. But they could also not predators around with those tails too, but that help them keep their balance. How did plant-eating dinosaurs live? Similar to the plant-eating dinosaurs often look like herding animals because they weren't as ferocious as the meat eaters, so they had to have group protection instead of individual protection. And like I said, that some of them they're discovering, they think they're more colorful than we once thought. They were just brown or maybe green. Now there's some evidence that maybe they were pretty colorful. And this could be an easy one. Who had the strongest bite of the dinosaurs? T-Rex. T-Rex has so anyway, kind of, it's really fascinating. Kids are really into this. And in fact, Judy can testify that if we had some kids scattered among you, they would have answered a lot of these questions. And you can go in any store and you've got clothing with dinosaurs, you've got books, you've got games, you've got plush animals, and all of that, because they're the in thing then. They're the in thing. So anyway, you've been a great audience. Are there any questions? Well, I hope that it's been a little bit informative day about not only book writing, but some of the subject matter that I have chosen. And like I said, you're welcome to look at some of these original illustrations. Like I said, I was so thrilled to get it, and it's so expensive now to have anything even mad because of the increased paper costs that I haven't done with what I'd hoped to, and maybe still have the opportunity to do. So thank you. Have a good day. It's good to see you again. You're always such a great and wonderful audience. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. So take care. And I wish I could do better, but it's just the printing costs now. The mouse book is 20 and the dragon's tail is 25. And like I said, then you know, you can get Michael Martin Murphy to read that one to you.
Thank you very much, and we'll see you next month.